Okay, hi guys, welcome to this edition on an interview with Daostack. This is Master Crypto's first interview, online video interview, and the project that we're about to assess or ask questions to is Daostack, and with me is the founder of Daostack, Matan, right? We're gonna start by asking him a few questions, and he will take the floor, right? Okay. Hi, Matan. My name is Aziz. So let me start by asking the question, right? So,
Hi, Liz.
hi. The central solution of okay, before that, right? Can you give us a few words or a few lines about what is a DAO stack all about, right?
Sure. So, I would say that the greatest potential of the blockchain is not, I mean, we've seen blockchain 1.0, which is the ledger, which is allowing us to have a global transaction network, centralized global transaction network. And we've seen blockchain 2.0, which is the computer, the decentralized computer, the Ethereum, which allows central smart contracts and central application. But I would argue that the highest value or the potential of the blockchain is actually in what we call decentralized applications, and more so decentralized organizations. Decentralized applications are similar to applications that we are familiar with in the regular web. For example, Airbnb is an application, Uber is an application, and so on and so forth. Facebook is an application, and then this decentralized application is similar to those, but with the difference that it is controlled and owned and operated by a decentralized crowd and programs on the blockchain rather than a centralized company. So the alignment of interest in those applications are better aligned with the crowd and not with some invisible stakeholders. Similarly, decentralized organizations are similar to organizations. So it's a large group of people who are working together to achieve some certain goals. But the difference is that it's not like a hierarchical, top-bottom, rigid organizations, and rather it's a crowd organization which is fluid, agile, and most importantly can grow much faster and more effective than existing rigid organizations. So this organization is basically large number of people coordinated around shared goals with code on the blockchain. And I would argue that this is the highest potential of blockchain. So these are decentralized applications and decentralized organizations. Now the most missing links or missing pieces in order to facilitate dApps, we call decentralized application, we call them dApps, and decentralized organization, we call them DAOs. So the missing link or missing pieces to facilitate a large number of dApps and DAOs is the yet missing collective decision-making engine. So if you have a decentralized organization, you need to have somehow coordinate the inputs of many, many people effectively into creating outputs, decisions. The same for decentralized organization and same for decentralized application. You need to coordinate large number of inputs of people into decisions, into outputs with the code on the blockchain. This thing, transforming input of agents into output, we call that decentralized decision-making or decentralized governance. And that's the missing element right now for enabling dApps and DAOs. So Daostack is a full suite of tools for decentralized governance that can facilitate, can engine any decentralized application or decentralized organization easily, which means that you can easily integrate with any kind of governance system, akin WordPress for websites. So we say that Daostack is for DAOs as WordPress for website.
Okay, thank you for that, Matan. That was a very clear overview of what Daostack is. And essentially, in a nutshell, a one-liner would be what you said is it's Daostack is similar to what you call a WordPress is for the website. So I think that's a great parallel, right? So the central solution of Daostack is what you call blockchain governance, right? So can you explain what exactly is government in blockchain governance in blockchain context, and why is very, very important for the concept of governance in a decentralized system?
So governance is simply the accumulation of inputs from members, from agents, and transforming that into outputs, into decisions. So for example, let's say, and that now what is the role of governance, of course, depends on the use case. So let's pick up a use case. So let's say that we are speaking about an investment fund. So rather than having an investment fund that is managed by 5 or 1 or 20 people, let's say that it's a management fund that is operated by the crowd, by 20,000 people. So 20,000 people put up a fund together, and they co-manage that fund. So for example, they need to make decisions in what project to invest their shared fund. Now, the inputs are members who are saying, I want to invest in that project. I don't want to invest in this project. I think this project is good. I think this project is bad. These are kind of the inputs that goes into the system. And then the output is eventually a decision, a collective decision, a crowd decision that either invests in a project or doesn't invest in a project, or how much to invest in the project, and so on and so forth. So this is an example for a crowd decision-making functionality. And that's basically what we call by decentralized governance. So the ability of transforming inputs of many, many agents into a decision in certain contexts, in any context. And that's why it's important. Basically, any sort of decentralized application or any sort of decentralized collaboration or organization of any sort will require to have that engine. Without that engine, you cannot coordinate large number of people into a single coherent action.
Okay, thanks for that, Matan. All right, so we know that the blockchain is the concept of huge interest from many people and many entities and organizations, right? And they are keen into exploring it further, right? This includes many businesses that are keen to, for example, enhance operational efficiency through automation and some sorts, right? So, or even those interested to build their own applications or companies. So, how does the value proposition of Daostack help in those regards?
So, I mean, again, it depends on the use cases, but generally there are two kinds of, I would say, value propositions that Daostack has. So the first kind is if your business is to build a certain decentralized application, for example, again, it can be an application for like crowd investments. It can be an application for decentralized insurance, for example. It can be an application for curation of restaurants. So every such, if your business is to build any sort of decentralized application that requires collective decision making, then you can integrate with the stack and basically get the governance element, the decision making element out of the box. You don't need to build it yourself. You can just plug in directly. You don't even need to know how the blockchain works. You can plug in directly from JavaScript. We made a friendly JavaScript layer that allows front-end developers to integrate with the stack without the need to know anything about blockchain. So that's one kind of value proposition. The other kind of value proposition is that if you want your business itself to organize as a DAO, so if you want your business to be operated by a crowd, or maybe not totally, maybe you want to engage a crowd. Let's say you have a company, but you want to engage a crowd of few thousand people to participate in your business, maybe in ideation, maybe in execution, maybe in decision making. So whatever that function would be, you can use Daostack, and you can even use the first interface that we have, Alchemy, which is an interface for decentralized crowd budgeting of projects. So you can use those tools directly to interact with a decentralized crowd to be engaged in your project.
All right, thanks for that. Okay, the game changer for a highly successful blockchain project is its success in attracting the mainstream masses, right? In terms of attracting real world businesses and developers, right? So do you think that the market is ready for a decentralized organization solution, given the extreme infancy of the blockchain market, as well as the uncharted territories of the DAOs?
Yeah, yeah, I think I mean, there's a chicken and egg here. On one hand, massive adoption will come from bringing the blockchain to mainstream, but on the other hand, bringing the blockchain to mainstream will come from mass adoption. So there's a chicken and egg here, and I think everyone are waiting for what we call the killer app of Ethereum, or the killer app of the blockchain. Like, what would be those apps on the blockchain that provide? So it should be two things. Firstly, it should provide value beyond any application which doesn't use the blockchain. So a new kind of value that doesn't exist there. And secondly, it could provide that value with the existing level of technology that we have right now, because the blockchain, as you say, the blockchain technology is in infancy, which means that it still moves slower. It still can facilitate only that and that, number of transactions a second, and so on and so forth. So there is like still limitation to the technology, and you need to be able to provide value for mass adoption of some application under those limitations. And of course, those limitations will become better and better, but it will take time. So I actually think that the DAO is the killer app. So I think that the DAO is that killer app that can provide significant value with the current limitation. So, for example, let's pick a concrete use case that I think is really needed out there, and that can support it. Actually, let me give you two use cases. So, first use case is decentralized decision making about budgeting, and that's exactly what Alchemy does. So today, for example, you have hundreds of blockchain projects that raised tens and hundreds, even thousands of $1 million. So like enormous money. Now, they also have thousands of open source developers and hundreds of thousands of open source developers interested to be part of those projects and contribute code and other stuff, not just code. Now, the problem, like the actually limiting factor for further innovation and growth for those projects is their ability or their limitation in using that infinite capital and deploying it into human resource, into developers, and to further grow your innovation. And the actual limiting factor is decision making. I mean, the one person, let's put it that way, one person cannot effectively spend $1 billion fast. That's the limiting factor. The actual limiting factor is the decision making, not lack of capital, not lack of developers. The bottleneck is decision making of capital into deployed into developers. So that's exactly what DAOs are solving, and that's exactly what Alchemy is solving. The ability of crowd participation around decision that allows you to make very large number of decisions in a very short time effectively. So that's for example, a killer use case that we are now piloting. We actually just launched the pilot of it. Completely different use case. Let me touch, for example, ICO rating. So ICO rating is a huge business. Right now there are hundreds of platforms that are doing ICO rating, and it's a very big business in the blockchain space. However, almost all of them are completely broken because the interest is broken. Like almost all of them projects are buying their rating, so the incentive to do the right rating is broken from the beginning. The business model of those platforms corrupting the platforms, and then it's very hard to actually know what's a good project and what's not a good project. But now imagine you have a decentralized ICO rating. You have a platform where anyone can participate and rate a project, and you have a decentralized ICO rating that has much better alignment of interest and thus produces much better results, and then thus produces much better views, and thus produce much better business. So that's another use case. But again, also there you need to have this collective decision-making process where a lot of inputs from people about whether a project is good or bad or how well a project is transform into one decision about rating an ICO. So that's, I think, another use case, which I think is a killer app, will actually have mass adoption once fully deployed. And actually, we are also working with another team. We're also working on that project as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Matan. Okay, and I agree with you that the central component of making sure that a decentralized community or environment works well is with proper governance, and that's what you're trying to do, right? to allow for that, to facilitate that, you have to have very, very strong mechanisms. And one of them is in Daostack's case is the reputation mechanism, right? So can you explain more about that?
Right. So you have to have several things in place to make it right. I mean, the governance question is a hard question. It took us quite a long time to get it right, and it has several elements. Reputation is one of them, but it's not the only one. But let me tell you a bit about reputation, what is advantages and what is disadvantage, and how we bypass the disadvantage or to solve them. So reputation is simply a name that we use for voting power. So we can have a score, just as you can have. So it's not tokens. So tokens are something that you can transfer to your friend. Reputation is something that you cannot transfer. So if you have 10 points of reputation, you cannot transfer that to someone else. And then if someone else has 15 or 5, then they have a different voting power. So if you have 10 points of reputation, you have twice the voting power, twice the impact of your voice with respect to someone that has 5 points of reputation. So when I keep saying that there is a governance system that picks inputs from agents and then transform them into outputs, into decisions, then this governance takes into account the inputs from many agents, and the way that it decides which input is more or less important is by its reputation, by the reputation of the member. So this is what reputation is. Now, the advantage of, maybe let me tell you very shortly what's the alternative to reputation. So alternative to reputation is token based voting or tokens based input weighing. So for example, we will consider, the governance will consider your voice with respect to the number of tokens in the economy that you're holding, plutocracy if you want. So this is the alternative. Now the problem with plutocracy is that it's very highly corruptible. It's very highly manipulable. And that's something that just corrupts the governance system, any sort of token-based voting system. Now, the advantage with respect to that, the advantage of reputation is that it's pretty resilient. It's pretty protectable from manipulations. So that's the advantage of reputation. Now, the disadvantage of reputation is that, maybe disadvantage with respect to what? With respect to market governance, there are kind of like market governances where traders are governing the system. Again, it's very manipulated, but it's also can produce maybe more decisions. So the downside of reputation system is that they are maybe more slow. I mean, if you want to be resilient, if you want to be protectable from manipulations, you naively can generate a small number of decisions in a given time. To bypass that, we've invented a new kind of consensus protocols, a new kind of decision-making protocols that we call holographic consensus, in which reputation systems can produce very large number of decisions at a given time effectively and protected with manipulations. And the way that it does so is by entangling or adding to that reputation system an additional system, which is token-based, which is market-based. It's a prediction game or Oracle network. And that network basically supports the reputation system by predicting the good decisions to make and filtering from large number of decisions, filtering those who are most, I would say most promising, and by that providing signaling. So in a way, this extra market network is using as a navigator for the collective attention of the reputation system, but at the end of the day, the decisions are made only by the reputation system. So together, the reputation system and the Oracle predictor network together produce both scalability of number of decisions in a given time and resilience and protectability from manipulation. It's a bit technical. It's a bit more technical.
Yeah, it is. But thanks for clarifying for that, right? Okay, next we move on to the ease of use for developers, right? Because it's very important because developers are the main, are the sources of development, of innovation, and which is very, very essential to a platform like Daostack. So how easy it is for any kind of developers, not blockchain engineers or those just normal coders who are just well versed in traditional computing language, how easy it is. Can you talk us through the process of development, right, of app development or DAO development on Daostack, right? Do they need prior blockchain experience or some sort?
So that's exactly what we are constantly moving towards, making the DAO stack accessible for anyone, any developer without any skills or acquaintance with the blockchain. So we had a first layer, which is Arc, which is the governance framework that we developed. But then on top of that, we've developed ArcJS, which is a JavaScript bridge, with a bridge to JavaScript. So if you're developing a front-end an application, a regular web application, and you're using JavaScript, which is the normal standard language to develop web applications, then you can directly interact with the blockchain and directly interact with Arc, with the Arc framework, the governance framework, without needing to know or understand the blockchain and how it works. We are actually now even doing another code architecture shift, in which we are picking. You won't even need to understand the context of Arc, because Arc has a context. It has several different elements into it. For example, if you want to build a DAO, you need to have, I mean, you are by definition, when you open a DAO, you can open a DAO with a single transaction, with a single command in JavaScript. But then when you open that DAO, you have different elements playing a game. You have the reputation system, you have the token system, you have something we call the avatar, you have governance modules. So you kind of like need to understand the context. But now what we are doing is that we're abstracting that, and we're picking some elements which are like the core, the thing that is mostly needed in many projects, and we are enabling the developer to integrate directly with that, with a voting system. So for example, let's say the developer already developed his decentralized application, and he's just lacking that element for making a voting of agents transferred into a decision. And again, using this holographic consensus engine, which I argue is the only way to scale up decision-making in a resilient manner. And then we are encapsulating that a voting system, again, into JavaScript in a way that allows you to interact with it only without even understanding the larger context. So it should be, bottom line, should be very, very easy. Also, documentation is getting better and better over time. And the main guiding rule for us is to make it accessible for front-end developers that do not have experience with the blockchain, because this is really where the massive adoption is lying.
Okay, thanks, Matan. All right, so the next question talks about the blockchain agnostic nature of projects, right? So Daostack will be built on the Ethereum blockchain, right? Does Daostack plan to be blockchain agnostic, meaning that it can be created on other blockchains? And if yes or no, what are the advantages and disadvantages that you see of being operable across a variety of blockchains?
So firstly, Daostack is already built on the Ethereum blockchain. It's already live on the mainnet. So that's one. Secondly, yes, it will be blockchain agnostic, or it potentially or philosophically it should be blockchain agnostic and blockchain agnostic once there are other relevant blockchains operating. We definitely have the interest to develop Daostack on them as well and make interoperability between blockchains. However, right now I'm not aware of any single blockchain that facilitates smart contracts and is scalable and operational and resilient. So right now Ethereum is the only one, but philosophically, yes, we want to be blockchain agnostic. The upsides, I mean, generally I think interoperability between different technologies is good. So the upsides, of course, is that you can let, in a way, the users decides democratically decides for the technology they're using. You can make, I think the ecosystem will be more resilient if you have interoperability between different blockchains. Generally, I think the ecosystem will be more resilient. You will also have a larger network effect. Like if you have some crowds that are focused on blockchain A, and then you have some other crowds who are focused on blockchain B, but then once you make interoperability, you are enlarging the network effect of the crowd that is supporting your, whatever you do. So generally, there are mostly upsides from interoperability. The downside, of course, is only if you are making bad interoperability. So, for example, if you're connecting a lot of blockchains in a way that the kind of like total capacity of the blockchain is limited by the bottlenecks, so it's limited by the slowest ones, or so then it's a downside. If the safety of the system is limited by the least safe blockchain, it's a downside, and so on and so forth. So if you're making interoperability such that you are always impacted by the least something blockchain, least safe, least fast, least something blockchain, then it's a downside for interoperability.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, let's talk about Traction for a moment, right? The first application, as you just mentioned just now, was Alchemy, right, built on Daostack, a user interface for budgeting and resource allocation. So there's already, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's already an MVP, a minimum viable product for that, right? So can you tell us more about that and the timeline of what we can expect from that, right? And what doors it would open?
Yeah, so Alchemy is already live. I would call it an alpha, and it's live on the mainnet. We've just launched an internal pilot, well, semi-internal pilot, this week. You can already process with the decentralized decision making, which means that you can already let a crowd to make proposals to use funds, and then vote on those proposals if you have those people who have reputation. And then also, as I mentioned before, with the orographic consensus and the predicting Oracle network, you can also let people make predictions about the fate of proposals. So these things already exist, and the pilot is launched, and we'll start seeing it more in action. Within the next few months, we're going to do several iterations, several pilots on that. So in terms of timelines, I would say that in the next 3 months, we'll have between 2 to 3 pilots running, with growing engagement. So right now, the pilot, for example, we have about 40 reputation holders playing the game, and in the next pilot, we'll have many more, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of reputation holders participating. So in the next 3 months, we are making several pilots, improving the application, adding features, and then at Q4, so around, I hope that around at Q4, so October this year, or maybe around towards the end of the year, we would like to actually launch the Genesis Fund. So basically, the idea is that most of the proceedings that we have raised in our token sale will be eventually managed by a DAO, the Genesis DAO, on top of our own platform. So we would like to launch the Genesis DAO. So right now it's basically the Genesis DAO pilots. So we'd like to launch the real Genesis DAO towards the end of this year. And then we have a roadmap with also on our website for many more advances of the technology, including integrations to other tools such as Slack and Trello and all that for management and decentralized management, and including one major technology shift will be off-chain. So we want to develop much of the blockchain logic. We want to migrate it to off-chain. That will make the application much more scalable in terms of blockchain transaction limits. So that's something that we are also aiming for next year. We would like to. We're going to add identity right now. Right now, it's kind of like anonymous, and we want to add identity profiles and all that, and your ability to tie your blockchain identity with your social identity, your Twitter, for example, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things to add in. Right now, it's a very it's working, but it's a very narrow and lean application.
Okay, I think it's commendable that you guys are doing the Genesis DAO, as what you said. But you guys are really, like putting it into action through the ICO funds that you guys have raised, and doing a Genesis fund on top of Daostack, right? Which is really, really practicing doing what you guys are preaching. I think that's commendable. Okay, when you talk about scalability, right, and your view towards off-chain progression development. So this is contentious in a sense that because polarizing, right, the scalability issue. What would you say to those who feel like philosophically blockchain should all transactions should be on the actual blockchain because that is transparent. We can actually see and verify that on the blockchain. But when it goes off chain, there's a veil of like privacy. So what do you say to like purists, right, who rather prefer the on-chain scaling method rather than off-chain?
Well, I would say that it's simply not realistic. I mean, the application cannot be all on chain. The blockchain is not meant for that. It's not. It will never be as scalable as you want to facilitate everything that you have every single computation that you have in the world. It's simply not meant for that, and it's not possible. It's not realistic. You have to have most of your. At the end of the day, we'll have to have most of our logic computed off chain, and that's also okay. I mean, it's not reducing. I mean, let's put it that way. It's not reducing the security and the things that matter. Yes, you need transparency, but you don't need the transparency about each and every bit. You don't need transparency about each and everything in the system. You need transparency about what matters. You need to consensus about what matters. So off-chain architectures allow you to migrate everything that doesn't matter off the chain while remaining on the chain everything that matters. And also making that in a secure fashion so that you maintain your security and consensus and transparency and everything else. Basically, you're using game theory incentives off the chain to allow smaller number of people to agree about the reality that otherwise the whole blockchain network would agree about. So you allow a smaller community off the chain to agree about that reality, but in a way which is verifiable and kind of like confirming the consensus, although it's not on the chain. So that's, in a way, you are getting the same effect as the on-chain, but much, much more effectively.
Thanks for clarifying that. Okay. Last question, right? We dive into the token utility, right? So how does the native Daostack token, i.e. the GEN, function within the platform, and is it needed?
Sure. So the GEN is the native token for attention, basically the collective paying attention, or buying attention, buying collective attention. So basically, as I mentioned, governance systems have a problem. They need to satisfy two criteria at the same time, which are very conflicting. So on one hand, they need to be resilient, so they need to be protectable from manipulation. So if I can abuse the system, I can manipulate the system to make the crowd decide what I want, then the governance system is not good. And then sometimes also need to be scalable, which means that you need to be able to facilitate large number of decisions quickly. Now, it's kind of like in tension with each other, because if you want resilience, you kind of want everyone to vote about everything. But that's, of course, not scalable. If you want scalability, you want little number of people just making this quick decisions. Each decision is made by small groups on behalf of everyone, but then it's not resilient. So that's why we invented holographic consensus. It actually allows for small groups of people to take decisions on behalf of everyone. But just by the way, this is very analogous to off-chain computations. So, but in a way that guarantees or that ensures that those decisions are actually in line with the majority, with the consensus. And the way that it works is that there is an additional Oracle network of predictors that constantly make predictions about the fate of proposals, and they make that for profit. They make it for business. Now, this entire Oracle network, the predictions about the fate of proposals, is done with the GEN token. So if I'm a predictor in the Oracle network and I want to predict that certain proposal is going to pass, then I need to stake some tokens on it, and that's the GEN token. So I need to stake some, let's say I'm putting 100 GEN token, and I'm saying I'm willing to predict that this proposal is going to pass in this DAO. And then if I make a good prediction, I'm going to gain more Gen tokens. And if I'm going to make bad prediction, I'm going to lose my tokens. So this is the utility basically of the Gen token. It's actually critical to the facilitation of a large scale and resilient governance systems, and across the entire DAO ecosystem, DAO and DApp ecosystem that is riding on top of the Daostack platform or framework, and the entire prediction network, the entire Oracle network will be running, if you want, on gens. Just as Ethereum is running on Ether, the Oracle prediction network is running on Gen, and that's critical for the scalability and success and resiliency of the DAOs and dApps that will be using Daostack.
All right, thanks for that clarification. I think we've come to the end of the interview. Thank you very much for your insightful thoughts and clarifications on Daostack. And I'm sure our readers and those who view this interview would definitely have a very insightful view of Daostack and the project is on, and we're very excited about this innovation in this space, and we will definitely be looking forward to more updates and hopefully go behind your success as a blockchain project. So I'd like to thank Matan once again. Thank you very much for your time and your clarification, and I hope everything goes well for you.
Thank you, Aziz. Good luck.
Pleasure. Thank you.